Hello and welcome to another episode of KARE 11 on the Record. I'm political reporter Danny Spiewak. This November, Minnesota has an open U.S. Senate seat on the ballot. That's rare, and there's a fierce Democratic primary for that spot between Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan and Congresswoman Angie Craig. This week, as a part of our candidate interviews, we sat down with Congresswoman Craig to talk about her vision for the campaign ahead of the convention this spring for the party and the primary in the summer. Well, Congresswoman, thank you for coming to KARE 11 and joining us. We appreciate it.
Oh, it's great to be here.
Sure. So you are in a very tough Democratic primary for this U.S. Senate seat with the Lieutenant Governor, Peggy Flanagan. Right now, make your pitch to a Democratic primary voter in Minnesota as to why you should be the choice of the party.
Well, look, I am ready to go, ready to run. I'm in the House for 4 terms, ready to step over on the Senate side and fight this administration and all of the policies that of course, we disagree with them on, and also try and get stuff done. I've done that in the House. I've had 13 bills signed into law since I've been a member of Congress, including the cap on insulin at $35 a month for this nation's seniors. My second pitch, though, is about the fact that I'm battle-tested. You know, at the end of the day, I've run 5 tough races in the 2nd District of Minnesota. Republicans have spent $50 million over that time trying to take me out, and I just keep winning by more. So Michelle Tafoya is going to be a formidable opponent on the Republican side if she gets herself to the finish line, and I believe that I'm the strongest Democrat we can put up statewide.
Your opponent in the primary has sort of painted you as I think she's used the word, the corporate candidate or the centrist candidate. Do you think you can effectively message to the Democratic base in this race?
You know, when I talk to Democrats throughout the state of Minnesota, they're not dividing us into camps. And I don't even think those words mean anything, progressive, centrist, anymore. It's about who you're fighting for and what you're advocating for the people of Minnesota. And I think I've proven that I've been willing to take on big groups, interest groups like Big Pharma. They spent $6 million trying to take me out in my 2022 race because I wouldn't back down until Medicare could negotiate its drug pricing. I've been willing to fight for family farmers across this country as the top Democrat on the House Ag Committee. And I think all of those things will make me an effective statewide candidate, but more importantly, will help us bring voters back who have left the DFL over the last several years. We can't forget that in 2024, every single county in Minnesota moved right. It didn't move toward us. And so my message of being able to focus as a Democrat also on bringing back some of those family farmers. And we also can't forget about the L in the DFL. The labor movement built the middle class in this country. And right now I have 14 labor endorsements to my primary opponents, too.
What do you make of the sitting senator, Senator Smith, endorsing your opponent?
Well, look, Senator Smith and I have been dear friends over the years. And, you know, I just walked into politics about 10 years ago. I haven't been part of the St. Paul establishment or the D.C. establishment, and in many ways, since I got here and flipped a Republican seat that had been in their hands for 3/4 of a century, I've always felt a little bit like the outsider because at the end of the day, I haven't been involved. I've been working to grow business for over 2 decades, St. Jude Medical here in the Twin Cities for many, many years. I was a newspaper reporter starting out in life. My wife and I just focused on raising our 4 sons. Now we're the Mimi and Gigi, the 2 beautiful grandsons of our son Jacob and one with our son Josh. And so at the end of the day, I haven't been part of the political establishment for a long time. And I appreciate that all these relationships are interesting over the years. But at the end of the day, you know, I'm outperforming in my own congressional district the top of our ticket by 8.5 percentage points. And I believe the only way that we're going to stop Donald Trump and Kristi Noem and this administration is by winning elections. And I've proven that I can do that. And the truth is, as we get around the state and they get to know me better and I get to know this state better, our polling has done nothing but go up since I got into the race.
Of course, the response to Operation Metro Surge and immigration enforcement has become a top issue in this Senate primary. You voted for the Laken Riley Act last year, one of the president's top immigration bills. Do you stand by that vote?
Well, at the end of the day, the president and Kristi Noem are not using the Laken Riley Act or any other law to terrorize the people of Minnesota. In fact, the point is they are not using any law to do that at this moment in time. At the end of the day, I have stood up to Kristi Noem by introducing articles of impeachment against her, and I have long been a supporter of comprehensive immigration reform in our nation, from the Dream and Promise Act to the Dignity Act, which would allow folks who have been here and who've obeyed the law and paid their taxes and are part of our community to actually move toward a path to legal status. You know, in my role as the ranking member on House Ag, I'm put in the immigration space a lot. 45% of our nation's farmers employ undocumented immigrants. 45% of those farm labor are undocumented immigrants in our country. And so, look, I think most Minnesotans believe that we have to have a safe and secure border. If the Trump administration was going after the worst of the worst, rapists and murderers in our country, no Democrat would push back on that. But that isn't what they're doing. And so, as a member of Congress, I've had the honor and privilege of fighting side by side with the people of Minnesota against Kristi Noem's ICE.
When it comes to the Laken Riley Act, if that came up for a vote again right now, would you vote yes?
Look, I think at the end of the day, this has been just an incredible time for Minnesotans. And as I stood at the Whipple Center, as I faced down the ICE agents that had semi-automatic weapons pointed at me after, and Ilhan and Kelly after the murder of Alex Preddy and Renee Good, of course, I've asked myself that same question. And the honest answer is that I wouldn't vote today for a single bill that gave Donald Trump and Kristi Noem's ICE any additional authority. And so Laken Riley would fall right in that bucket.
Right now, DHS funding, of course, is a huge issue in Congress. What would you need to see from ICE, from the federal agencies, Border Patrol, to support funding DHS currently?
Well, when we think about what's happening here in the partial government shutdown that we're in, we have extended a bill to Republicans that would fund things like TSA, like the Coast Guard. We could get all of those things funded tomorrow if the Republican majority would bring that bill forward. But before I vote for a penny to the Department of Homeland Security and ICE specifically, we're going to have to see real reforms within ICE. And that starts with stopping racial profiling in our country. What we saw in Minnesota was just devastating, stopping pulling over black and brown Minnesotans for the only offense being the color of their skin, to check their papers. I mean, this shouldn't happen in America. Body cameras have to be mandatory for these people. They need to take off their masks. They need to wear proper identification. And frankly, they need to enforce the law in the same way and with the same standards that our local police departments are held to account to. So there's a whole lot of reform that has to take place before I would ever vote for another funding bill to Trump and Kristi Noem's ICE. It needs to be dismantled in our country.
At the height of the surge, you had a very public confrontation with the Majority Whip Emmer. Have you talked to him since that happened?
Of course I have. I work with him. It's, I confronted Tom Emmer because he had puppeted Kristi Noem's assertion right after the murder of Renee Good that she was a domestic terrorist. We saw what we saw with our own eyes, and I extended to Tom Emmer that he could help Minnesota at that moment in time by picking up the phone and calling the Trump administration and calling off the tactics of ICE in our community, this attack and assault on Minnesota. he wasn't interested in that. And so, look, I have continued to be very disappointed with my colleagues, my Republican colleagues, because they have not been willing to stand up to their own administration under any circumstances, no matter what happened here in Minnesota. I've talked to Tom. We have to get on a plane together and fly home after we have these confrontations on the House floor. And at the end of the day, I'm not going to stand down to my Republican colleagues until they step up and stand up to this administration.
Switching gears to another topic, the word affordability is everywhere. Everybody's talking about it, using that word specifically. If you were elected to the Senate, what around the economy, what would be some of your top priorities in that space?
Well, one of the reasons why I believe that we're winning by so much over the years in the 2nd District is actually, we didn't call it affordability, but we call it lowering cost, right? And putting more money in the pockets of my constituents. And this is something that people like myself and Governor Spanberger from Virginia and Mikey Sherrill from New Jersey, these are the things that we've been running on for many years. And I think it's exactly what we need to be focused on as a Democratic Party. I've been focused on how do we lower the cost of health care in this country, from Medicare price negotiation to $35 cap on insulin, to generic manufacturers being able to get to market much more quickly, to looking at how do we make sure everyone gets access to health care. These are the things that I've been working on for a number of years. As I travel this state, access to child care and being able to afford to have another child because you can't afford the daycare costs in a two-working household family. This is a really big issue, from energy cost to everything in between. At the end of the day, we've got to tackle these issues head on, and that is one of the most disappointing things among many that the President's State of the Union had absolutely, I think, 3 minutes of focus on affordability, and he keeps mocking it. And I would just remind the President that the American people didn't think Democrats in 2024 and the administration were as focused on the affordability crisis they see in their own budgets every single month, from housing costs to rent costs to all of the other costs, grocery costs that we've talked about. And putting your head in the sand and not recognizing the pain that people feel in their pocketbook, that is a recipe for disaster at the ballot box for a party. And I think Republicans are headed down that road right now.
Another issue that's of great importance to Minnesota, of course, is agriculture, and you're the ranking member on the Ag Committee in the House. You've got the Farm Bill coming up. A lot of the Farm Bureau and others have come out in support of what's being proposed. Where do you stand on the Republican proposal on that?
Well, I'm optimistic and hopeful that the ultimate Farm Bill that is negotiated in the Congress is going to be one that I can support. But the House version right now is not one that I am prepared to support. It doesn't meet the moment. Even the Farm Bureau has said that the president's tariff policies have cost farmers in America somewhere north of $50 billion, yet the aid that the Trump administration has offered our farmers is only $12 billion. And notwithstanding that Republicans cut $187 billion from Title IV of the Farm Bill, which is the nutrition title, the SNAP program. And that is falling on Minnesota counties right now. I just had them in Washington, D.C. this week. So I'm going to be fighting for a delay in cost shift to Minnesota in the markup this week. Moving that cost shift to Minnesota moved it to our counties, and we're already seeing property taxes go up in our counties as a result of shifting those costs back. The other thing that I think is going to be really interesting next week in the House version is there is a provision that would allow pesticide producers to never have to face any sort of legal consequences for the harm that those pesticides might cause. It's a preemption for pesticides. And that actually is dividing Republicans in Congress, because you think about the Make America Healthy Again movement in the Republican Party. And so we've still got some very difficult issues that in the House version of the Farm Bill we're dealing with. But again, I've talked to Senator Klobuchar. I've talked to the chairman in the Senate on the Ag Committee, the Republican who chairs the Ag Committee in the Senate. And I hope that these so-called poison pills can be removed from the Senate version and a delay in the cost shift to states can be achieved, and that everybody can get to yes in the end. But right now, this bill we're marking up next week, it doesn't meet the moment.
On the tariff issue, I was speaking with one of your colleagues, Representative Finstad, who had talked about wanting to diversify the market, not being so reliant on China. Is there an argument there to be made that you do need to diversify in more of a domestic market or just other countries?
Well, if that had been the strategy of the administration, that we want long-term diversification from China, I think that would have been a great strategy. But that wasn't the strategy. It was let's, tariff our friends who actually are buying our products like Mexico and Canada, and let's send China immediately to other countries like Argentina and Brazil to buy their products. And that just leaves American farmers hanging overnight. At the same time, the Republican administration hasn't prioritized expanding domestic markets in our country. So, yes, we need new markets and diversification, but when you just sort of snap your fingers and say, well, overnight we're going to piss off our friends, we're going to piss off our adversaries like China, and all of these markets move away from American family farmers, that puts them in a situation they're in today. Farm bankruptcies are up 46% year over year. That's not the golden age of farming in our country. And instead of talking about new markets for family farmers, whether that's foreign markets through trade or domestic markets through expansion of things like year-round E15, what we've actually done is we've put farmers in a situation where their costs are going up because of tariffs. They're losing their markets because of tariffs, and their commodity prices have remained low. So I'm all for let's help our family farmer, but this administration has been anything but strategic in the way that they've done it.
My last question for you is you served in the House and then you're running for U.S. Senate. We heard Governor Walz say a couple of weeks ago that he'd rather eat glass than serve in the Senate. It's something to that effect. There's a perception that Washington is broken from both parties. So how does one fix Washington right now?
Well, there's a lot that needs to change about Washington, D.C. What I would say is that as a House member, I've been able to get 13 bills signed into law. 4 years I spent in the majority with a Democratic president and Republican president during each of those years. And I've spent 4 years now, including this year, in the minority. And so we need to know what we're fighting against, the Trump administration and many of its policies, but we also need to be ready to govern effectively. And I think more than anything, as a member of Congress in the House, and I believe I will in the Senate, I'll be able to get stuff done. I'm someone who looks for a way to actually accomplish things. And that does require, even though I may not agree with one of my Republican colleagues on 80% of the issues, it requires still having an open line of communication. You never know if you're going to be in the minority or the majority. But I can tell you this, if we hold this U.S. Senate seat, and I know I will, that I do believe that we have a great shot of being in the majority in the Senate as well. And for Minnesota voters, if you put Amy Klobuchar and I at the top of this ballot in 2026, I also think we have a great shot of having the trifecta again in Minnesota here at the State House and the State Senate. So it's an interesting moment in time. I'm in the fight. I'm ready to continue the fight.
Okay, Congresswoman, thanks for the time. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Welcome back. It was a busy week at the Minnesota State Capitol again, marked by emotional testimony from parents of the Annunciation Church mass shooting. They testified before a House Public Safety Committee where the DFL had proposed bans on assault weapons statewide and high-capacity magazines. One of the people who testified was the mother of 10-year-old Harper Moisky, who died in the Annunciation shooting. Her mother testified in favor of those bans.
I need you to understand something. Parents in our community don't sleep all the way through the night anymore. Because when we send our children out into the world, we know that there are weapons out there capable of turning an ordinary morning into something unthinkable in seconds. On August 27th, we sent Harper to school. Less than 30 minutes later, a deeply unwell person carrying 3 legally purchased firearms opened fire on that church for 2 full minutes. 116 rounds. Harper yelled, "Get down," to her little buddy, and then she was fatally shot in the head and the neck. There is a sound that comes out of a parent when their child dies. It's not a cry or a scream. It's something older than language. It is so guttural and dark that it breaks everyone who hears it. It is not a sound you forget or ever recover from, and it's a sound that will live with us for the rest of our lives. I don't want you or anyone you know or anyone in general to ever hear it, but your decisions shape whether other parents will ever make that sound. I need to speak plainly about that weapon. The AR-style rifle is engineered for maximum tissue destruction. The rounds travel at such high velocity that they create catastrophic shockwaves, a blast effect that tears through tissue well beyond the bullet's intended direct path. This is not like other guns. The damage to Harper's body was so severe, we were not allowed to see her, hold her, or be with her body ever again. And then, months later, as the pews were removed from that church, more of her remains were found. We had to cremate our daughter a second time. Imagine receiving that phone call and then tell me, what is this gun for? Hunting? There are other tools. Home defense? There are other tools. What is this one for? Our community already had our school shooting, so why am I here today? Because I don't want this story to become yours. I don't want you to hear the cries that we've had to hear. You stepped into public service for a reason. So right now the question in front of you is quite simple. What kind of state are we going to be?
But there is virtually no chance this session that assault weapons bans or high-capacity magazine ban will pass in 2026 because the Minnesota House is split evenly between Democrats and Republicans. House GOP leadership has said they believe these bans would be ineffective and potentially unconstitutional. We sat down with one of the leaders of the House GOP, Floor Leader Harry Niska, to talk about his view on all of this. Leader, thanks for taking a few minutes today. I just want to start with Annunciation families are really all over the Capitol this week. They're calling specifically for the assault weapons ban. Why don't House Republicans right now support that?
Well, of course, all of us, especially those of us who have parents or who are parents of kids in school, want our kids to be safe in school. And, we're really focused on trying to find ways that will actually make a difference on that. The governor is really focused on proposals that we don't think are actually going to make a difference. And, if you look at other states that have done similar gun bans, if you look even at other countries that have similar gun bans, we've seen just in recent weeks a mass shooting in Australia and a mass shooting in Canada, which have the kind of gun laws that the governor is pushing for. So definitely respect and appreciate the parents that have been touched by tragedy stepping forward and being involved in this, but we just have a difference of opinion on the best way to go forward. We think we should focus on making sure that we have mental health resources so that people, obviously someone has to be having a serious mental problem to think it's a good idea to go into a middle school and shoot up middle school kids. We've got to focus on that piece of the problem, and we have to focus on how we make schools safe. The new, funding, there's a great technology that's available to help actually create safe schools that doesn't impact law-abiding Minnesotans and make them into criminals that have nothing to do with actually solving the problem of school safety.
Given the attention and the emotion and passion around this issue, specifically with the assault weapons and high-capacity magazine proposals, why not at least let it come to a vote of the full House and see where it lands?
Well, I think we know that there really isn't. First of all, there really isn't bipartisan support for these proposals, and we know that they're not likely to work. You can look at the data from other states, from other countries. We know they're just going to get tied up in litigation, even if they do pass. And so we think it's better to focus on things that could pass, that could make a difference, and that's where House Republicans have been focusing our discussion.
When you look at some of your proposals and even some in the governor's package that he unveiled, there seems to be some common ground around school safety or mental health supports. Do you envision finding a solution that both parties could support in those areas?
We hope so, and we think we could have done that a few months ago if the governor, when he first started talking about a special session, if he had called a special session based on the things that we could have come together and done. So we do hope that there will be continued discussion on that and some continued progress on that. Private schools like Annunciation should have access to school safety funding. Every kid should have school safety, whether they're in a private school, a charter school, or a public school. And so there are proposals that have been brought forward in the past by the Catholic Conference and other private school organizations asking for that kind of school funding. We hope that there will be bipartisan support for things like that. There's a SHIELD Act, looking at different ways, new technology that's been implemented in some schools that would help really provide for some real school safety. Those are the practical things that we think we should be focused on. We hope that bipartisan discussion will be focused on, so we can actually make some progress on keeping our kids safe in school.
Have you had direct correspondence with the Annunciation families? I know they've reached out to a lot of the Republican caucus to put the issue forth.
Yeah, so there have been conversations with Annunciation families. I have a friend whose parent or whose kids used to be at Annunciation, very close to those folks. I know that they're doing some singing and prayer service here, hoping that I'll have a chance to stop by that. But definitely, like I said, I'm a parent who has a middle school and a high school kid, and we all, that would be the worst nightmare for any parent, and is to have something like that happen. So definitely feel for them and keeping them in our prayers, and really important to emphasize how honorable and important it is that they are taking their tragedy and speaking out and getting involved in the process. That's what all of us should be doing whenever something like this touches us, is thinking about ways that we can help other people as a result of the experience that we've had. So really respect them for stepping forward and making their voice heard, whether we agree on all the specifics on what to do or not.
I know based on what we saw this morning and this week, I know a lot of them may feel let down by the House Republican caucus position on this issue. What would you say to those families?
Well, this is what we do in America. We talk about our experience and we come up with ideas, and sometimes we agree on what ideas will work or won't work, and we work it out through the process. And so definitely respect the tragedy that they've been through and whatever feelings they have about it. I mean, I know anyone who has an idea or puts forward a view has a right to advocate for that view and to be disappointed if that view doesn't prevail through the process. And then we continue to have those discussions about what are things that we can find common ground on, things that we can make progress on.
When it comes to red flag laws, obviously that was something that passed a couple of years ago from the Democrat-controlled state government, but they're proposing potentially more awareness around how to implement red flags and catch people who may be a danger to themselves or others. Is that something you may support?
So I think that's an important topic of conversation and further inquiry. What is it that would make that law work better? What is it about that law that didn't work in this particular instance, and created a situation where the person before they went and did shoot up that school, during a prayer service, how that wasn't prevented. What are the things that we can do to figure that out? I think we're going to have some good additional conversations about that, and I hope that we can find some ways to make that more effective.
Okay, Leader, thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for joining us again on KARE 11 On the Record. Remember, you can stream us every Sunday morning at 8 a.m. on KARE 11 Plus, and every episode is available on demand.